Inimba full episode review, August 8, 2026. Thumeka wants Zethu's baby. She just became a mother, and already, everyone around her wants a piece of her child. Today's episode of Inimba pulls back the curtain on a household that looks peaceful on the outside and is falling apart on the inside, and by the end of it, you will understand exactly why fans are calling this one of the most emotional episodes of the year. Stay with me, because we are breaking down every single moment, every hidden motive, and every look exchanged between characters that you might have missed the first time around. We open on Zethu, exhausted, sitting on the edge of her bed with her newborn son in her arms. She is not glowing the way new mothers are supposed to glow in the adverts. She looks like someone who has been awake for days, someone who is trying to hold herself together while everyone around her keeps telling her how she should be feeling. Motherhood was never going to be easy for Zethu, and this episode makes that painfully clear from the very first scene. She loves her son, that much is obvious in the way she looks at him, but there is a heaviness in her eyes that tells us she is struggling to find her footing in this new chapter of her life. And honestly, who could blame her? She is being pulled in every direction by people who claim to love her but are really only thinking about themselves. The first person pulling at her is her sister, Thumeka. Now, on the surface, Thumeka looks like the doting aunt, the helpful older sister stepping in to support Zethu through the hardest weeks of new motherhood. But if you watch closely, there is something else going on here. Thumeka does not just want to help. She wants to take over. Every time Zethu tries to hold her own baby, Thumeka is right there, hovering, correcting her, taking the child out of her arms before Zethu even finishes a sentence. It has gotten to the point where Zethu has had to remind her sister, out loud, that this is her baby, not Thumeka's. Imagine having to say that to your own sister. Imagine having to defend your right to hold your own son in your own home. That is the reality Zethu is living in this episode, and it is heartbreaking to watch unfold. There is a particularly tense scene where Thumeka all but scolds Zethu for wanting to bathe the baby herself, treating her like she is incapable, like she is still a child who needs supervision rather than a mother who just gave birth. Zethu's frustration boils just under the surface, and you can tell this is not the first time this has happened. This is a pattern. Thumeka has appointed herself as the real mother in this situation, and Zethu is being pushed further and further to the sidelines of her own son's life. It raises a question the show wants us to sit with: is Thumeka doing this out of love, out of her own unresolved need to nurture something, or is there a deeper resentment buried in there, something about Zethu's life that Thumeka wishes was her own? The writers do not give us a clean answer yet, and that ambiguity is exactly what makes the storyline so compelling. But Thumeka is not the only one adding pressure. Enter Thumeka, and this is where the episode title really comes into play. Thumeka wants Zethu's baby, and I do not mean that lightly. Throughout this episode, Thumeka is shown pressing in on Zethu with a kind of intensity that makes the walls feel like they are closing in. There is a moment where Zethu, overwhelmed, essentially says she cannot breathe with everyone crowding her, and Thumeka is right at the center of that suffocation. Whatever history exists between these two women, it is clear that Thumeka sees an opportunity in Zethu's vulnerability right now. Whether her motives are about status, about family standing, or about something more personal we have not been told yet, one thing is certain: Thumeka is not backing down, and Zethu does not have the strength right now to fight her off. Thankfully, Zethu is not completely alone. Zulani steps in during one of the more tender moments of the episode, standing beside her, trying to be the steady presence she needs while everyone else treats her like she is falling apart. There is a doctor's visit woven into this storyline as well, and even the doctor has to step in and tell everyone in the room to calm down, because the tension around Zethu has become so thick that it is affecting her recovery. Think about that for a second. A medical professional has to intervene not because of a health complication with the baby, but because the family drama is so overwhelming that it is putting Zethu's well-being at risk. That tells you everything you need to know about the environment she is trying to raise her child in. Now let's shift over to the other major storyline running through this episode, because while Zethu is dealing with her own crisis at home, there is a much bigger storm brewing around the Zondo family business, and it centers on betrayal. Wandel has been keeping secrets, and this episode finally starts to unravel them. We learn that Wandel has been working with Lazarus behind the scenes, and the two of them have drawn up a contract that was never meant to see the light of day, at least not yet. This contract apparently hands over a 10% stake connected to Mr. Zondo's company, and the way it has been signed suggests Wandel went around his own father to make it happen. This is not a small betrayal. This is the kind of move that could tear a family apart, especially one that has built its entire identity around loyalty and legacy. What makes this even more painful to watch is that Sydney is only getting fragments of the truth. He knows something is wrong. He knows Wandel has signed a contract that affects the company. But he does not have the full picture yet, and the show does a brilliant job of keeping the audience one step ahead of him, letting us see just enough to understand the scale of what is happening while Sydney is left piecing together scraps of information. There is a scene where Sydney confronts the situation with growing frustration, trying to figure out why the people around him will not just give him a straight answer, and you can feel his anger simmering, because deep down he suspects that whatever is going on, it is going to blow up in everyone's faces very soon. And here is the part that really stings. Even Wandel's own wife tried to warn him. She told him, plainly, not to go through with this, not to align himself with people like Lazarus, not to make a move this reckless without thinking about the consequences. But Wandel did not listen. The episode paints him as a man who believes he knows better than everyone around him, a man so convinced of his own vision for the future that he is willing to risk his relationship with his father, his standing in the family, and possibly the trust of the entire household just to get ahead. It is the classic tragic flaw playing out in real time, and if you know this genre, you know it never ends well for characters who take this path. There is also a heavier accusation hanging over the storyline, and it is one that the show plans carefully rather than stating outright. Someone close to Mr. Zondo has been feeding information, acting as what can only be described as a mole within the family. The episode drops hints suggesting that suspicion is starting to fall in an unexpected direction, and there is a pointed moment where it is made clear that whoever this person is, they are in a position where their actions could destroy not just their own reputation but someone else's career too. Names like Nodzile come up in this context, and the show is clearly setting up a slow burn reveal for who has really been talking behind the family's back. We are told, very clearly, that the rest of the staff are not going to be informed until the family decides they are ready, which tells us this secret is being guarded closely, and that whoever eventually finds out is going to have a very strong reaction. Adding another layer to this web is Core and her parents, who are connected to Lazarus in ways the show has not fully unpacked yet. There is a line drawn between the people who are considered family and the people who are considered employees, and it is used almost like a weapon in one of the tenser exchanges of the episode, a reminder of where loyalty is supposed to lie and where it has clearly broken down instead. It is subtle, but it tells us that class and position are just as much a part of this conflict as blood ties are. Now, let's talk about the one storyline in this episode that actually gives us a bit of hope amid all this chaos, because Inimba always knows how to balance heartbreak with heart. Zethu and Zolani's relationship finally gets the spotlight it deserves in this episode, and for once, it is not shrouded in secrecy or conflict. Both sets of parents have apparently given their blessing to this relationship, which is a huge deal considering how much resistance we have seen in past storylines around who Zethu is allowed to love and build a life with. There were rumblings that some family members felt Zolani was not the right match, that the two of them were too young, too inexperienced to understand what a lasting relationship actually requires. But this episode shows those concerns being pushed aside as preparations begin for an Amjadai, a traditional celebration meant to honor this next chapter for the young couple. It is a beautiful contrast to everything else happening around Zethu. In the middle of family betrayal, business scandal, and suffocating pressure over her baby, here is one thing in her life that finally seems to be moving in the right direction, one relationship built on mutual respect rather than manipulation. And then there is Thumeka, who gives us one of the most touching moments in the entire episode. She has been quietly planning a gesture, something meaningful to celebrate someone close to her, and the show reveals that it involves a graduation gown, a symbol of achievement and pride. Thumeka wants this moment to feel special, to remind the people around her that even in the middle of family chaos, there are milestones worth celebrating properly. There is a scene where she becomes emotional while preparing the surprise, clearly overwhelmed by everything happening in the wider family, but determined not to let that stop her from showing up for the person she cares about. It is a small storyline in terms of screen time, but it carries real emotional weight, especially placed right after such heavy scenes involving Zethu and the Zondo family business. By the end of the episode, we are left with several threads pulling in different directions. Zethu is still trying to find her footing as a mother while her sister and Thumeka continue to close in around her, each for their own reasons. Sydney is inching closer to the truth about Wandle's betrayal, and it feels like it is only a matter of time before that confrontation explodes into the open. The mystery of who has really been talking to outsiders about the family's business is still unresolved, but the show has clearly planted enough seeds for us to start forming our own theories. And amid all of it, Zethu and Zolani's relationship, along with Thumeka's heartfelt gesture, remind us that this family, as broken as it looks right now, still has moments of genuine warmth buried underneath all the tension. What did you think of this episode? Do you think Thumeka's overprotectiveness comes from a good place, or is there something more selfish going on beneath the surface? Are you Team Sydney in figuring out the truth about Wandle, or do you think Wandle actually has a plan that could still work out in his favor if given the chance? And who do you think is really the one feeding information behind the family's back? Drop your predictions in the comments, because this storyline is only just getting started, and I have a feeling next week's episode is going to answer at least one of these burning questions. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you never miss a recap. Turn on notifications too, because Inimba drops new twists every single week, and you do not want to be the last one to find out what happens next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next review.